If a stronger no kick invert is on your goal list, then keep watching because today I'm going to take you through my 3 steps to a stronger, more effortless invert. But first, please give this video the thumbs up, subscribe to my channel so I can keep bringing you more valuable content just like this video. Step number 1, correct your setup. Your setup is essentially the building blocks of your invert. If you're not using correct muscle engagement or technique in the setup, then the rest of the invert isn't going to go smooth. So let's talk about how to correctly engage your muscles and use correct technique in the setup phase. So for the setup, I'm going to get you to start standing slightly in front of your pole. So your butt is literally just in front of the pole. By starting with your hips here, rather than here, you're instantly going to start to feel a lot lighter as you invert. So my hips are slightly in front. From here, I'm going to place my hands kind of at about chin, almost boobie height, and making sure that I'm keeping my shoulders down and back. So it's really important that when I'm setting my invert up, that I don't sit here with shoulders all the way up towards my ears, because I am not going to be using correct engagement, and I'm actually going to end up overusing areas such as my back, which is going to cause that very common mid-back or lower back pain in your inverts. So instead of having your shoulders raised up towards your ears like so, I'm going to see if you can try and pull those shoulders down away from your ears. So notice how I yanked them down as far as I could. Now it's also important with my shoulders that I don't round forward over the pole, because that's again also going to cause a lot of overcompensation and pain through my back, and it's also going to cause me to overuse muscles such as my biceps and my pecs, instead of using giant muscles all down my back here, which obviously if I use the bigger muscles, I'm going to get a much stronger invert. So again, hips just in front, my shoulders pull down, and I'm going to make sure I don't round over the pole. I'm really going to try and think about opening my chest. So boobies out for me, shoulders down, squeezing backwards a little bit, and you'll notice that my chest looks instantly nice and open. I don't have that rolled forward shoulder look. So shoulders are down and back. Next little bit that I want you to look at is your hips. Make sure that you're not arched through your lower back. This is going to cause, again, pain through your hip flexors and pain through your lower back, as you're going to overcompensate with those areas. So to prevent that overcompensation, we need to think about engaging our core by simply tucking that belly button in. So I'm going to think, tuck my tummy in, and that's actually going to stop me from arching, and it's going to allow me to kind of tuck my tailbone under to a more neutral position. So holding that neutral position, tummy tucked in, shoulders are down and back, I am now in the perfect setup position to go into my inverts. Now, if I was to keep that arch through my lower back, my abs would then have to try and not only just lift me upside down, but now would also have to try and create that tuck so that I can get that butt up over my head. So just one last recap, my shoulders are down and back, my pelvis or my core is on to help tuck that tailbone under, and now I am ready to move on to the next phase of my invert. Step number 2, maintain your correct muscle engagement and technique through the next 3 phases. That's the rotation, the V, and the lower phase. Let's talk about the rotation phase first. So coming into my correct setup, feet slightly in front, shoulders down and back, away from my ears, and core engaged. I'm going to initially try and almost get my knees as close to my shoulders as possible, almost like the joint is one. The closer I can get that knee to my shoulder, the lighter my hips are going to feel. So again, my shoulders are down and back, core is engaged. I'm going to think about trying to almost pull the shoulder down out of the roof, like I'm trying to pull the pole out of the sky. And that's going to help me maintain the engagement through my upper back muscles. So again, I'm going to try and join my knees in as close to my shoulders as possible. Once I'm here, I've got to think about now pulling the pole out of the sky to pull my pelvis into the pole. And then from there we can V. So again, you'll notice I maintain my shoulders down and back the whole time. And if I do not do that, my pelvis isn't going to come all the way into the pole. So if I don't keep my shoulders pulling down and back, or think about pulling the pole out of the sky, I'm going to again overuse my biceps and I'm going to drop. So If you're finding that you're dropping too early, you're definitely not maintaining that shoulder engagement through that rotation. So just simply thinking to yourself, I want to pull the pole out of the sky. A good little exercise you can practice is just coming down into kind of this bridge position here. Keeping your head a little bit lower than your hips is a little bit easier than having it all the way up here. And I want you to think about, again, pulling the pole out of the sky. So I'm gonna pull down, almost like I'm trying to squeeze my shoulder blades back together. And I keep the pole closer to my hip bone than I do my rib. So it's in my waist, but the closer the pole is to the top of my hip bone, the lighter I'm gonna feel as I invert. The closer it is to my ribs, the heavier I'm gonna feel. So again, I'm coming down, my hips are up, and my core is engaged, so are my glutes. So I'm not relaxed and I'm not arched. I'm gonna engage my core by tucking my tummy in, squeezing my glutes, and then I'm gonna pull the pole out of the sky. And I'm not gonna stop pulling, no hanging allowed. As I pull the pole out of the sky, I'm gonna proceed to pull my inside knee in as close to my shoulder as I can. From there, I'm gonna lift, pull, see if I can lift my knee up off the floor and pull it to my other shoulder. Now, as I lower, I'm gonna gently keep my hips into the pole as I lower one foot down and follow with the other foot. Definitely an exercise that's harder than it looks, but if you can attempt 3 each side and just work on that engagement or pulling the shoulders down and back. And as we then move on to our V phase, it's important that we also maintain this engagement. So again, maintaining my shoulders, pulling. So it's like I'm pulling the pole out of the sky, out of the roof, keeping those shoulders down and back. So coming into my V phase. Now, just before I get to the V phase, also just make sure you're not trying to V your legs too early. If I V before my hips get into the pole, my butt's gonna feel very heavy and I'm gonna just smack down to the floor. So make sure that your hips get all the way into the pole before we start to V. So I'm maintaining my shoulders down and back. I'm gonna pull my knees in, pull the pole out of the sky, and then trying to straighten my legs. Now notice in my V, my shoulders are still down and back. I'm trying really hard not to just hang. So I don't wanna do this because you're gonna get a lot of pain through your upper back and your lower back. Instead, we're gonna keep engagement, so no hanging allowed. I want you to pull your shoulders down and back. And then as we lower, we're gonna bend the knees. I'm gonna pull the pole out of the sky, lower my booty first, then my legs. Now, it's very important that I lower my booty, then my legs. Your lower is just as important as your going up phase, your invert phase, and it's actually a really good thing to work on if we're trying to learn to invert without kicking. So again, I mentioned before, butt first, then feet. If my feet lower, you're gonna smack down. So if I do this wrong, and I lower my feet, that's really heavy, and I'm gonna smack down to the floor. So pay attention this time. I'm gonna keep my engagement, shoulders are pulling down and back. They're still engaged, they're still pulling the pole out of the sky. I'm gonna lower my butt, knees are still attached to my shoulders, and then I'm gonna lower my feet after that. So I'm maintaining the muscle engagement on the way down. Because I do find a lot of people, they have amazing engagement on the way up, but on the way down, they've just kind of disregarded everything and done it with incorrect technique, which is what's caused a lot of injuries from their inverts. So we've talked about your shoulders and we've also talked about your core. It's also really important to consider your neck and head positioning when it comes to inverts as well. Funny thing to think about, I know. But we want to try not to sit with our head looking back. So you don't want to look towards the floor. You want to try and think neck, back, like you're trying to give yourself a sexy triple chin. So we're all going to start to learn to embrace our sexy triple chin position when we're inverting. So again, I don't want you to look like this. It's okay if you want to look all the way, so all the way towards your boobs, that's fine. I like to try and aim for a more neutral position. So my head tucked back in that sexy triple chin position. So none of this. It's not an engaged neck and you're gonna get a very, very sore neck, and it's actually not gonna help you with your inverts at all. So I'm gonna keep I'm always gonna keep looking this way, looking for my hips. So I'm gonna pull my knees in, head back, embracing my triple chin, looking up towards the roof, bend and control the lower down. So again, none of this. So none of this. And it also doesn't look as nice. Step number 3, make sure you include pre-activation and strengthening drills in your warm-ups before attempting to invert on the pole. We can't expect any of the muscles that we just spoke about to just easily activate and wake up for us when we attempt our inverts. Instead, I thoroughly suggest spending at least 10 to 15 minutes before you even attempt to invert up the pole on some pre-activation drills for those upper back and core muscles. And today I'm gonna spoil you. I'm gonna share with you 4 of my favorite pre-activation drills to help you get those effortless, injury-free, no-kick inverts in no time. All you're gonna need is a long resistance band. But we're gonna start first on the floor, on your back. Now for this exercise, we're gonna focus on warming up your core. It's very important that we don't sit here with an arch through your lower back. So I shouldn't be able to fit my hand between your lower back and the floor. Instead, we need to try and think about tucking your tummy in. So literally sucking belly button in towards your spine and getting that back as flat to the floor as you can. From here, maintaining that nice flat spine, you're gonna lift one knee up so it's on top of your hips, still maintaining the flat spine and that engagement through the core. We're gonna follow lift the other knee up. From here, you're gonna place your hands directly on the front of your thighs and just give them a bit of resistance. And you should already start to feel a bit of tension through the core. So I'm gonna keep the tension between my left hand and my left leg, and I'm gonna extend my right leg out long. I take a big inhale as I kick, and then a big exhale as I return that leg back into the center. Again, maintaining my nice flat spine. So I should never arch. When I arch, I'm gonna end up overusing or overcompensating with my hip flexors and my lower back, which we wanna prevent both when we're up the pole and on the floor. So I want you to press that spine flat to the floor. If you are struggling to keep that spine flat to the floor, we can make this one a bit easier by placing that bent knee down on the floor. And it's just gonna make this a little bit easier on your lower back if you were feeling any pain, on your hips if you're feeling any hip popping, and just give you a chance to learn how to keep that core engaged and spine nice and flat to the floor. Now my suggestion is to do 12 of these each leg. So I'm gonna go 12 on the right. Once you hit number 12, you're gonna hold it out there for at least 20 seconds. Take a big exhale, return it back into the center, and then you're gonna change sides and you're gonna do 12 on the other leg. Again, your harder variation is knee up on top of your hip, or you can make it easier by placing the knee down on the floor. A couple little things before we move on. Just make sure your shoulders stay down away from your ears as well and nice and open to the floor. So they shouldn't be up here and they shouldn't be rounded. Try and keep the tension off your shoulders, keep the tension in your core. Also just make sure if your legs are up that that knee that's not supposed to be moving doesn't actually move. So don't let it fall away. And also don't hold it in too close. And no holding it in with your hands. We should keep it directly on top of the hip. From here, I'm gonna get you to sit up onto your butt. And you're gonna grab a hold of a long resistance band, and we're gonna place it around the feet, stretch those legs out long. So we've got just a soft bend at your knees, not completely straight, just a soft bend. Now just keep an eye that your pelvis isn't tucked under. We wanna try and sit up tall and just stick the booty out. From here, I'm gonna make sure that I keep my shoulders down away from my ears, so none of this is allowed. And then I'm gonna proceed to just squeeze my shoulder blades back and then release back out straight. Squeeze backwards and then release back out straight. So I'm literally just aiming to move my scapula or my shoulder blades. I'm trying to squeeze them together like I'm trying to squeeze a lemon between my shoulder blades and then release back out nice and straight. Now notice my shoulders don't raise up towards my ears. Notice I'm also not bending my elbows. I'm just focusing on the movement through my shoulder blades. Like we were on the pole, we were trying to pull the pole out of the sky. I'm now trying to squeeze my shoulder blades backwards. So I'm just keeping those elbows straight. My arm isn't doing the movement. This joint is, my shoulder blade is. And also just keep an eye. A lot of people, they tend to kind of just pull with their arms. So don't just pull back and down with your arm. Think shoulder blades squeeze and then release. I suggest aiming for about 10 to 15 of these. You don't need to think about wearing yourself out with these exercises because we are using them as our pre-activation or muscle wake-up drills before we jump up the pole to invert. Think of these more as waking up your muscles. So it doesn't need to be a massively heavy resistance band and you don't need to do a huge amount of reps. You're just trying to wake up your muscles and get a little bit of that mind-muscle connection going on. Now this one, I'll just give you a back view as well. Again, I'm not keeping my shoulders up towards my ears. I am squeezing them backwards and then release. Squeezing them back, not doing this, down. So almost think about squeezing at the very base of your shoulder blades. As I squeeze back, it's here, not up here. And I'm also trying not to lean. So you don't want to rock backwards because I'm just using my lower back, yeah? None of this. Sit up nice and tall, squeeze back and release. From here, we're going to move it now up to standing for our final 2 exercises for today. So keeping a hold of your long resistance band, we're going to tie it around the pole. So we're going to tie it and try and keep the band and my hand at about belly button height. And from there, I'm just going to make sure that I keep my shoulder down away from my ear. So it shouldn't be up here and it also shouldn't be rounded forward like so. I want to try and think about rolling my shoulder down and back and maintaining it there throughout the entire exercise. So keeping my shoulder down and back, I also create a soft bend in my knees. So I'm not completely locked straight, standing up tall, just a soft bend in my knees and none of this hips thrusting forward thing either. Try and keep your hips just slightly behind. I also make sure my knees don't cave in. I try and keep them open over my toes the entire time because that's going to help keep my glutes and core nice and strong, which is going to help my shoulder activate better. So keeping my shoulder rolled down and back, making sure I'm level, don't lean to one side, don't have one shoulder higher than the other. From here, I'm going to proceed to externally rotate and let the hand fall back in. So again, I pulled my wrist out, externally rotating, and then let it fall back in. Now these ones, try not to let your elbow come out. So a lot of people do this. It's not going to be working and waking up the correct muscles. Keep that elbow super glued into the side of your waist the entire time. And just pay attention, you're not leaning into it. Keep up nice and tall. So, and I've also got my palm facing up to the roof. And just big exhale as we rotate outwards. Inhale as you rotate back in. Now this one we should be feeling through the back of the shoulder. So all back here. If you are feeling it down here or other funky areas through the front of your shoulder, something's not quite working correctly in that movement pattern or something in that technique. So make things a little bit easier, whether it's a lighter band, whether you give the band a little bit more slack, or you just grab a bit further out in the band so there's not so much tension. Make it a little bit easier until you can hold your shoulder in the correct position and feel it back here. And that may even mean completing the same movement without any resistance. But be picky with yourself and make sure you do feel it in the right spots. So again, elbows super glued in, I'm keeping my shoulder down and back. And generally, if you're not feeling it in the right spots, just think about a little bit more down and back through those shoulders. I'd suggest aiming for at least 10 each side for this one before moving on to your next exercise. For your third exercise today, we're going to be using the pole. And I'm going to demonstrate first with my right hand on top. So I want your hands almost hot potatoed, like so, and you're going to place them just in front of your face. From here, we're going to think about pulling my shoulders down away from your ears as you lift and lower back down. And just notice how as I lift, I keep my toes on the floor. The reason behind this is because I want you to keep a little bit of body weight in your feet, just while you learn to keep those shoulders down and back. As soon as we lift those feet all the way up off the floor, we're taking on our whole body weight for like a full body weight chin up, which is really difficult. And that difficulty can make it really hard to keep an eye on the technique you are using through your shoulders. So don't just calf raise in saying all that. No, just calf raising. We want to try and take as much body weight through our arms as we can and as little as possible staying in our feet. But just taking as much as you can, maintain correct engagement in your shoulders. So focus on that quality of movement first. So again, I'm gonna think about pulling my shoulders down away from my ears as I lift and lower back down. So if I was to keep my shoulders up towards my ears, I would look like this, and I'm literally just pulling with my biceps. Now this is a tiny muscle. Yeah, so you're not gonna get as much strength out of this as if you were to use the larger muscles of my back, which stretch the whole way down by pulling my shoulders down. So always think shoulders down, then lift. And you should really be feeling these muscles activate back here. Now, the next thing you want to pay attention to in those shoulders is just making sure you're not rounded over the pole. I find a lot of people easily get those shoulders down, but they still look very rounded like this. Instead, we really need to think boobies up, or think ribs up towards the roof as you open those shoulders back. So remember how we did that previous exercise where we opened the arm up into external rotation? It's almost that same position through the shoulder. So again, boobies out, I like to look slightly up. As soon as you look down, you're gonna find your shoulders are gonna fall down and they're gonna round forward over the pole. As soon as I look up, everything's gonna open up. So look up, pull the shoulders down and back. As you do so, do make sure your core is engaged. So you're really thinking about tucking your tummy in. To be honest, if you're doing everything right through your shoulders, you should almost feel that real brace through the stomach, like someone's just come in and tried to kind of punch you in the stomach. But just consciously do check in on it. Make sure you're really thinking about tucking that tummy in. Now, I'd suggest aiming for anywhere for about 5 to 10 with your right hand on top, and then swapping, popping your left hand on top and aiming for about that 5 to 10. But let me give you a back view with my other hand. So I'm gonna really focus on pulling my shoulders down and back away from those ears, and then lowering back down. So again, shoulders pull down and back, and lower back down. Now making sure I don't do this. I'm really thinking down and back. So really thinking those ribs up. And it does help if we think about looking up towards the roof. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment below with how these tips have helped you improve your inverts. But please remember, Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither are your inverts. So keep putting these tips into action over the next few months, and you'll start noticing a huge difference towards your effortless no-kick invert.